who are really emphasizing. Rare to find students who really can take out 1 or 2 years. So because the causes are rare, therefore the effect is rare. So this is pratitya samutpada. Once again, dependent arising. If you bring all the causes all the causes together, then the fruit comes. But if the causes are not there, then the fruit doesn't come. And oddly enough, just having a conducive environment where you can stay without being rich. I mean, if you're very wealthy, you can just buy the environment, right? You can buy it. But if you're not so wealthy, people going on for 1, 2 years, that can be quite expensive. In a normal retreat center in America, it can cost you $60 a day. Do that for 2 years, and you're looking at a lot of money. And not many meditators are all that rich. So that's why I'm very keen on creating, or working with people, creating centers where people can live very simply for very little money, and then be able to meditate for long term. Maybe find benefactor. Okay? So not so common, but I am persuaded that it's not impossible. You just need to create the causes and conditions for it. Please explain the phrase sensations of the breath wherever they manifest in the body. When you're sitting quietly, or you could be in the supine position, like right now. You'll probably experience, how do you know you're breathing? If your eyes are closed, you're not looking at your body, then you're just focusing your awareness in tactile awareness, tactile sensations. You may feel some sensations of the breath even in the arms, as the arms raise a little bit. The chest, certainly. The belly, certainly. You may feel some kind of a rippling effect even down the thighs, down the legs. You may experience the breath at the apertures of the nostrils. You may feel a little bit in the throat. The rising of the shoulders. Just subtle sensations related to the in, the out breath. So wherever they manifest, you just attend there. Okay? So it's a very soft. This is not yet sharply focused. There's a time for that. But first we want to be diffuse, very relaxed, grounded in the present moment. So that's what I mean by manifest, wherever it is evident, wherever it's quite easy to detect. How do you deal with external noise, whether a constant background or sudden intrusion? That's a very good question. It depends on the practice, but here we're practicing shamatha, which means that we're not just letting the attention rove, but now if you're sitting there and a sound arises to your auditory consciousness, of course you hear it, but you just let it be. You don't deliberately give attention to it. You don't think, oh, what was that? Oh, maybe that's the air conditioning. No, maybe it's a car. Oh, what's that? You don't go off intentionally following the sounds, or if your eyes are a little bit open, you don't look at the environment. Or if there's maybe a little bit of fragrance, you don't go off there to the smell. So whatever sounds arise, just let them be. Just let them be. I travel a lot. I'm in airplanes a lot. That's my meditation hut is really in economy class. So that's where I do a lot of my meditation. I put on my noise-canceling headphones. This is one of my luxuries. I have Bose noise-canceling headphones. I'm giving a little advertisement here. But I don't get any profit. But they cut out the noise a lot. They cover over the ear, so it's very comfortable. They cut out a lot of the noise. I sometimes put on little, like folder, something over my eyes. Very good for meditation, right? But traveling a lot, I'm not so much referring to my own practice, but I see people on the airplane. A lot of them have something to read. Either it's a novel, or maybe they're working on business, they have their laptops open. And I see very frequently, there's turbulence, there's noise, there's a baby crying, there's a flight attendant coming up and down. These are normal people, not meditating. But see how focused they are, And it's not that they don't hear, but if they've gotten some paperback from the bookstore at the airport, a page turner, they're practicing some kind of samadhi, right? So the sound comes, but they're not putting down the book, oh, what's that? What's that? The sound comes, whatever, but they're really interested in the book. Or they're doing work on the laptop, but they're really interested here, and that's what this practice is. You voluntarily direct your interest. You say, now, I really want to practice shamatha. That's what I'm interested in. So other sounds come, okay, they come, but I'm not going to pay any attention. Just let them come, whatever. So if it's just a background noise, like the air conditioning, that's white noise. It's easy to kind of let that slide. But even if it's a more sharper noise, a car honking or a dog barking, so it's kind of like a spike, like that coming in. Just release it with no aftermath, with no thoughts following through. Oh, why does that dog have to bark? Oh, why do people have to harm their... don't go into the commentary. Just the sound comes, sound goes, just let it be. Okay? And preferably, for shamatha, you would like to be in a quiet environment. But we don't always have that choice. If we're meditating at home, no guarantee it's always quiet. So then we just let it be without being disturbed. Okay? Thank you. And this one I've already responded to. Meditating by sitting on a chair with the back straight, is this okay? Yeah, for some people, sitting cross-legged is just too painful. Or after a while, it just gets too uncomfortable. The back muscles are not sufficiently developed, or maybe there's a back problem, or some people have problem with the hips, some people with the knees. And so sitting in a chair, if it's good enough for Maitreya, I think it's good enough for us. That's one way. There he is. He's ready to come down from Tushita, come into the world, and so he's ready to go. And so what I would suggest there, this is not a bad chair here that I'm sitting on. What you don't want is an easy chair that makes you slouch, slump into a very soft cushion and like that, with the back curved and all sloppy. So having something in between, if it's too hard, obviously not comfortable, but this is quite good. I've got a cushion here, and what I like very much is this. This is very good, because what you want something in a chair is something right at the base of the spine, at the coccyx, the very base of the spine. Some support there. So I'm going to now be in a meditative posture in the chair. So I'm feeling really firmly this cushion at the base of the spine. I'm not leaning back. I don't want to do that. I want to be sitting straight. But right at the base of the spine, I'm getting good support. So now if I just have a place for my hands, this is quite good. And so the shoulders are relaxed, the arms down, the hands just dangling loose. But I've got support at the base of the spine. My knees are down. I want my knees flat on the ground, not cross-legged, flat on the ground. So I also now have a nice little cushion here, so the feet are warm. They've got a good firm platform. This is quite good. No problem. Yeah. So for shamatha, you don't want to be walking because it's too much movement. And if you start going deep into shamatha, you might start walking into things. Not so useful. You don't want to be standing because then you have to give too much attention to just maintaining your balance. You don't want to fall over. So walking and standing can be good for vipassana practice, perfectly good. But for shamatha, you really want stability, stillness. So the best, generally speaking, cross-legged. Sitting on a chair, quite good. Supine position. As long as you don't get dull, don't let your mind just fall into sloppy, like sleepiness. Supine is also good. Okay. My legs go numb very easily during meditation, either in traditional or half-lotus style. How can I slow down numbness? I would experiment. I've got a cushion, this is called a zabuton. I meditate regularly on a zabuton. Mine's a little bit thicker than that, not much. It's firm, but not too firm. So for myself, I have a zabuton and just a little Tibetan carpet. And then I have it against the wall, so I have some support just at the base of the spine. So I just have that support there, but I don't lean back, right, very straight. But the question here is find a platform for your legs where it's soft enough that it doesn't cut off circulation, and not so soft you feel you're sinking down. So your buttocks are sinking down, your legs are a little bit up. That's not comfortable, and it doesn't give you the support you want. So I would suggest just experimenting a bit, but I find the zabuton are very good. And then again, experimenting with the softness, not too soft, not too hard. And some people like the zafu. I don't really have any use for them, these, the Japanese, but some people find them very useful. But generally, sitting flat on the zabuton, I find very good. But in short, what I would say is experiment. Experiment. Maybe sitting cross-legged is not so good, in which case find a chair. Once again, soft, but not too soft. So just try to get it so that the platform, whether a chair or the cushion, is not cutting off circulation. And if it's too firm, that's what will happen. You'll cut off circulation, your legs go to sleep, and that's distracting. And you don't want distraction in this kind of practice. Is shamatha the quality we develop using a set of techniques, such as anapanasati? Is balance the closest translation of shamatha? Well, in terms of the straight translation of shamatha, calm abiding from the Tibetan shi-ne, calm abiding is a translation in common usage. Serenity is very common, tranquility And my slight preference is quiescence. So that's really the meaning of the term. And then the etymology says you're calming both types of imbalances, calming excitation and calming dullness. So balance is not really the translation of shamatha, but in the practice of shamatha, you're definitely cultivating balance, right? Attentional balance, and you're balancing stability with vividness, right? So the mind is both stable, that is continuous, and it's clear. It's wide awake, high resolution. So that's the very nature of shamatha. And so, so in practicing anapanasati, or in the Tibetan tradition, you may focus on a mental image of the Buddha. We will explore at least one other method. Day after tomorrow we'll begin, where you actually take the field of the mind. The object of meditation is your mind, right? That can also be a shamatha practice. I think maybe the fourth day we'll also explore a little bit a practice in the Tibetan tradition called awareness of awareness, or in the Pali Canon, the Buddha's teachings, vijnana kasina. Again, just an awareness of consciousness itself. Very deep practice. And so there are a wide variety of practices, 40 taught in the canonical teachings of the Buddha in the Pali language, and then others emerged over history. The methods that I'm teaching here, two of them come from the Pali Canon, one comes from the Tibetan tradition, but completely compatible with the Theravada. There's nothing, inharmonious or unharmonious with it. And so the methods, so shamatha is something we practice, but then there's also the possibility of achieving shamatha. And when in the Tibetan tradition, or the Indo-Tibetan tradition, when we speak of achieving shamatha, as I said before, this is equivalent to achieving access to the first jhana. Okay, the threshold, access, right on the edge. Okay? Oh yeah. I collect this is the first one that came in, but it's a big one, so it got on the bottom of the stack. My question is about belief. Stephen Batchelor, he's an old friend of mine. We knew each other in India 35 years ago, and then in Switzerland 30 years ago. Stephen Batchelor advocates Buddhism without beliefs, and I wonder what you think about the relationship between belief in rebirth between lives, say, and the kind of practice that produces impressive results. Perhaps you've looked into this in your shamatha project work. Yes. So I know Stephen. We used to debate back in Switzerland when we're both studying in the monastery there. I've read his book. I think it's impossible. Buddhism without beliefs is impossible. Who doesn't have beliefs? I mean, who operates as I never do anything with beliefs, I only act on what I know? Well, that's ridiculous. None of us know enough. And so all of us have beliefs. That's just unavoidable. And so the questions are, what are your beliefs and what's the source of your beliefs? And so I'm very fond of Stephen. He's a friend of mine. But I feel he's fundamentally misguided in this book on a number of points. And that is what I find, that he was very critical, kind of skeptical about reincarnation, karma, and so forth. It's a free country. And the Buddha encouraged that we can be free. We're invited to investigate his teachings. He never said we just have to accept reincarnation, karma. The Buddha never said that, right? Very open, right? So Stephen, my old friend, is very critical, very skeptical. He calls himself an agnostic. That's in his email, agnostic. Good agnostic means I don't know. So that's quite honest. I don't know. But the ideal of Buddhism is not to be agnostic. Right? The ideal of Buddhism is to be Gnostic, to know, right? And so being skeptical, being very critical, investigating the assertions in Buddhism is very healthy. What I found in this book is that Stephen was completely uncritical with respect to the beliefs of scientific materialism. And so his book is not Buddhism without beliefs, it's Buddhist methods with the beliefs of scientific materialism. It's just a different set of beliefs. And so I find him remarkably unskeptical and uncritical about materialistic beliefs. And so I think if we're going to be skeptical, primarily we should be skeptical of our own assumptions. Because we are suffering now, not because of our beliefs in Buddhism. We're suffering now because of the beliefs we already had before coming to Buddhism. Right? Our beliefs, our assumptions. And so I think this is what the Buddha was really getting at. Not that, you must believe everything I've discovered. He never demanded blind belief, right? Never demanded that. But we should be very skeptical of our own assumptions that we've never critically investigated. Is the mind really just the brain? Do we have clear empirical evidence that consciousness terminates at death? Should we simply assume that? If so, why? Where's the evidence? As I argued last night in my talk, if all of your methods for studying the mind are all physical, they're all looking outwards to behavior, to brain activity, and then looking indirectly into mental states correlated with the brain or behavior. But if all your methods are physical, then of course your conclusions will be physical. And therefore, of course, you'll have no alternative but to think, oh, the brain died and behavior stopped. Oh, I guess consciousness must stop. What else are you going to conclude? And so I find that a very limited way to investigate the nature of the mind and consciousness, to limit ourselves only to physical phenomena when quite clearly the mind is not physical. This becomes very obvious as you develop your abilities to observe states of consciousness, as in citta satipatthana, the close application of mindfulness to mental processes, to consciousness, states of consciousness. None of them have any physical properties at all. Not an emotion, a thought, a memory, an imagination, a dream. None of them have any physical attributes. They don't have mass, they don't have spatial location, they don't have spin, they don't have electric charge. No physical attributes, right? Then you look at the brain has no mental attributes. It's just physical. It has charge, mass, location. It has all physical attributes. So mental phenomena and brain functions are completely different, but they do relate. But to say that they somehow are equivalent, I think, is a leap of faith, of blind faith. And to think that the mind can only exist independent upon the brain, well, if you've only studied the mind by way of the brain, of course, that's going to be your conclusion. But the strength of the Buddhist inquiry into the nature of the mind is actually observing mental states themselves and going to depth, going beyond the surface level of what's called jhana, the mental activities of memories, emotions, desires, thoughts, and so forth, penetrating beneath that to a deeper and deeper levels of consciousness. And then when you do so, it's primarily by means of samadhi, the practice and achievement of shamatha. Then you can actually investigate this very important issue for yourself. Not just with faith, not just with belief, but investigate it yourself. And see, is there a dimension of consciousness that transcends the limits of this one life, that may be the repository of memories, of imprints? When we see Gautama, young Gautama, as a young prince, spontaneously slipping into the first jhana, that doesn't happen to everybody, right? Very few. He was like a prodigy, a spiritual prodigy that just spontaneously achieved that. Where did that come from? His genes? Not likely. Or so many people, if you read the Pali Canon, so many of these disciples of the Buddha came to him. He gives them the short Dharma talk, like the first turning of wheel of Dharma in Saranat. And his 5 disciples, boom, 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 like popcorn. They're achieving marga. They're achieving nirvana so quickly. How is this possible? Or there's a famous, very short discourse by the Buddha to Bahia, who was a very experienced contemplative. And in one short discourse, Bahia became an arhat. So I keep on reading that short discourse, thinking, maybe this time. But I don't have the vasana, I don't have the mental imprints of Bahia. So where does this come from? To try to explain this in terms of genetics is just fantasy. So how do you explain this? So I think for many reasons, if we approach this not just saying like Stephen, who I'm very fond of, I think he's a good man, I think his motivation is good, but I think he should be more critical of his own assumptions and recognize whenever you're practicing, you do have beliefs. What kind of beliefs do you have? If you have materialistic beliefs, if you're uncritical with regard to the beliefs of neuroscientists and modern science, not the knowledge, but the beliefs, and you're simply embracing those uncritically, then you have materialistic beliefs joined with Buddhist practice. That's not a very good union, because the beliefs of materialism are a perfect fit for consumerism. Perfect fit for a very materialistic way of life. A perfect fit for the pursuit of hedonic pleasure. That fits perfectly, like a hand in a glove. Buddhist worldview fits like a hand in glove with Buddhist meditation and with Buddhist ethics. They're completely harmonious and supportive of each other. So my point here, I think Stephen's point one of his central points in his book is that the Buddha simply borrowed the notion of reincarnation because other people of his time believed it. I find this, number one, historically has no foundation at all, and it's really lame. I mean, what a fool he would be. I mean, Gautama, frankly, he would be a fool if he thought, oh, other people believe it, I guess I do too. Or, oh, this will make people more virtuous. It's not true, of course, but if I teach reincarnation and karma, that will make people be afraid to engage in non-virtue, and they'll be better. This is an idiot. And whatever Gautama was, he was not an idiot. And he himself, in this famous discourse, he said, do not accept things just because of tradition, just because it's in an old book, just because your teacher says, just because other people say. He explicitly refuted accepting just because of hearsay. So we're going to believe that he accepted merely on hearsay about reincarnation, where he's told everybody else not to do that? I find that ridiculous. So I think it's very clear in the Pali Canon. The Buddha said, in the first watch of the night, I saw with direct knowledge my own past lives, countless past lives. In the second watch of the night, he said, I saw with direct knowledge the rising and passing of myriad sentient beings. And then on the third watch of the night, then seeing the whole 12 links of dependent origination, the four truths, and then achieving liberation. This is his claim. This doesn't mean we have to accept. Again, this is not, oh, we must accept, you have to believe. But that is what he said. He did not say, oh, I heard somebody say reincarnation, I guess I believe it too. This is what a stupid adolescent might do, or a stupid child. Oh, somebody said, I guess I believe. That's ridiculous. And to superimpose such a superficial conclusion about something so important upon the Buddha, I think is unworthy. So I love Stephen. I think he has a lot of good insight. He's very sincere. But I think the notion that Buddha took reincarnation just because other people said, I think this is absurd. And there's no historical basis for that at all, where there's plenty of basis that the Buddha believed he himself had seen with direct knowledge. And then he didn't just say believe it. He said, if you want to check this out for yourself, then develop jhana. You don't even have to develop vipassana, right? Develop jhana and explore for yourself. So I would love to sit down with Stephen and say, Stephen, why don't you stop being agnostic? Why don't we practice shamatha and achieve shamatha, and then we explore and become gnostic about, does consciousness continue after death? Does it continue prior to this life? Because something is true. Something is true. Either the materialists are true, that consciousness just emerges from the brain and then terminates at death. Maybe that's true. But let's investigate it and not just say, I'm skeptical, I don't know, I'm agnostic. That's kind of an excuse for laziness. Like, oh, I don't know. If you have no method, then you say, I don't know, nobody knows. But if you have a method, then why not get to work? Right? Galileo, if he had no telescope, you could walk up to Galileo and say, Galileo, are there any moons around Jupiter? If he has no telescope, I said, I don't know. Does the moon have any craters? I don't know. You know. Are there any spots on the sun? I don't know. He would be an agnostic, like Stephen. But he developed a telescope. And he polished it. And he got it on a firm tripod of stability. He polished the lenses. He got clarity. And then he looked very closely. And he stopped being an agnostic. And he saw there are moons around Jupiter. There are craters on the moon. There are phases of Venus. There are spots on the sun. He saw things. He became knowledgeable about points that other people didn't know. And so then he had empirical evidence that the Earth was not in the center, that the Earth goes around the sun, and he stopped being an agnostic because he found an avenue to knowledge. So in the modern West, so many people think, oh, who can know? Oh, who can know what happens at death? Who can know? Who can know? As if there's no method. Well, in the West, there is no method. Or indirect methods. Ian Stevenson's research on children who claim past life memories. Indirect. But in Buddhism, we have a direct method. And the samadhi for the mind, the samadhi for probing deeply into consciousness. The telescope for that is samadhi. So, if we have a method, let's not be agnostic. Let's find out and know something. Because that's very important. If our whole existence is only 60, 70, 80 years, and that's it, that's one worldview. But if consciousness continues without end, that's a very different worldview. So, I think there are many good points in Buddhism Without Beliefs. But it's not Buddhism without beliefs. It's Buddhism with materialistic beliefs. And those are not Buddhist beliefs.